The final session. The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as Ambassador James Reed stood from his seat. For 3 months, representatives from 47 star systems had gathered on the neutral station of Haven Point, trying to resolve the growing tensions between Earth and the Dominion Alliance. The humans had been patient, diplomatic, even accommodating to demands that would have made lesser species surrender their sovereignty entirely. Captain Lisa Morgan watched from the observation deck as Reed gathered his papers with deliberate slowness. She had served alongside human diplomats for 15 years, had seen them negotiate through impossible situations, always finding some middle ground. But today was different. Today, something had shifted in the way Reed carried himself. The Dominion's chief negotiator, a towering insectoid named Prime Hive Speaker clicked his mandibles in what his species considered amusement. Surely, the human delegation is not abandoning these crucial discussions over such minor territorial adjustments. Reed looked up, his expression calm but somehow final. Minor adjustments? You're demanding we evacuate 17 human colonies, dismantle our defensive networks, and submit to Dominion oversight of all Earth trade routes. These aren't adjustments, they're surrender terms. The Centauri representative, Elder Blue Wing, fluttered her scaled wings nervously. Ambassador Reed, surely we can find compromise. The humans have always been reasonable people. Reasonable, Reed repeated, tasting the word. Yes, we've been reasonable for a long time. When you demanded we limit our expansion rate, we agreed. When you required permits for every new settlement, we complied. When you insisted on cultural monitors in our border systems, we welcomed them. His voice remained level, professional. But this is where reasonableness ends. The hegemony's war leader, General Vex, leaned forward in his chair. His species had conquered 12 systems before joining the Council, and he recognized something dangerous in the human's tone. What exactly are you saying, Ambassador? Reed closed his briefcase with a soft click that somehow echoed through the vast chamber. I'm saying that Earth formally withdraws from these negotiations. The human delegation will be departing Haven Point within the hour. The hall erupted. Delegates began speaking over each other in dozens of languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the chaos. Through it all, Reed stood motionless, waiting. Prime Hive Speaker raised his arms for silence. This is most irregular. The Council has not dismissed these talks. Earth cannot simply leave. Earth can do whatever Earth chooses to do, Reed replied. We are a sovereign species, not subjects of this Council. From her position above, Captain Morgan felt a chill run down her spine. She had grown up on the frontier worlds, had heard the old stories from her grandfather about the early days of human expansion. Before the Council, before the treaties and protocols, when humanity had been smaller but somehow more dangerous, Elder Blue Wing's voice carried a note of desperation. But without these talks, without agreement, there will be complications. Complications, Reed nodded slowly. Yes, I expect there will be. He turned to address the entire assembly. For the record, Earth sought peace. We came here in good faith, offered concessions, tried to find solutions that would satisfy everyone. But you mistake our desire for peace as weakness, our diplomacy as submission. General Vex stood, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. Are you threatening the Council? Reed smiled then, and somehow that expression was more unsettling than any threat. General, threats are what diplomats make when they're still trying to avoid conflict. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply informing you that Earth is done talking. The human delegation began filing out, their faces grave but determined. Reed remained until the last of his people had left, then turned back to the assembled delegates. One final time. A word of advice, he said quietly, but his voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. You might want to review your intelligence files on human military capabilities. I suspect they're somewhat outdated. As Reed walked toward the exit, Captain Morgan found herself remembering something her grandfather had once told her. Humans don't start fights, girl, but we sure as hell finish them. The great doors closed behind the human delegation with a finality that seemed to echo through the entire station. In the silence that followed, 47 alien species began to truly understand what they had just witnessed. The talking was over. The awakening. Within hours of the human delegation's departure from Haven Point, emergency sessions convened across the galaxy. The Dominion's high command gathered in their crystalline war chambers on Nexus Prime, while the hegemony's generals assembled in the blood-red halls of their fortress world. Smaller species huddled in their council chambers, uncertain whether to celebrate or prepare for disaster. Admiral Kate Stone stood on the bridge of the Earth battleship Defiance, watching the last of the diplomatic ships clear Haven Point's defense perimeter. 3 months of talks had ended in less than an hour, and now she had her orders. The fleet would return to Earth, but not in defeat. They were going home to prepare. "Ma'am." Lieutenant Commander Paul West approached with a datapad. "Long-range sensors are picking up increased military traffic throughout Dominion space. Looks like they're mobilizing." Stone nodded grimly. She had expected as much. "What about our intelligence assets?" "Still in place." Agent networks report. "The Dominion leadership believes we're bluffing. They think we'll return to negotiations within a week." On Nexus Prime, Prime Hive Speaker Clicks addressed the Dominion War Council. His compound eyes reflected the holographic displays showing human territory, seemingly small compared to their vast empire. "The humans have perhaps 200 combat vessels," he clicked confidently. "Our intelligence confirms they have never engaged in full-scale warfare against a major power." General Thane of the Hegemony's Third Fleet disagreed. His scarred face bore witness to countless battles. "My species learned long ago never to underestimate an opponent. The humans colonized 70 systems in less than 50 years. That requires capability." Clix's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Expansion against primitive worlds or empty space. They have never faced a true military force." Meanwhile, on the frontier world of New Texas, Colonel Mike Davis received the coded transmission that changed everything. Operation Homecoming was active. Every human military unit, every reserve force, every colonial defense fleet was being recalled. Not for surrender, but for something the galaxy hadn't seen in over a century. The message was simple. The gloves are off. Davis had served in the Colonial Marines for 20 years, had fought pirates and raiders on a dozen worlds. But this was different. This was total war, and humanity was about to show the galaxy what that really meant. Within the Galactic Council chambers, the remaining delegates struggled to understand what had just happened. Elder Blue Wing paced nervously before the emergency assembly. "Perhaps we pushed too hard," she suggested. "The humans seemed different when they left." "Different how?" asked Counselor Rex of the Trade Federation. "Focused," she replied. "Like predators who had just selected their prey." The Hegemony's General Vex had remained silent during most of the emergency session, but now he spoke. "My species has a saying, beware the anger of a patient people. We may have just awakened something that was better left sleeping." Back on Earth, President Susan Clark addressed the Global Defense Council in the deep bunkers beneath Geneva. The room held the most powerful humans in known space, admirals, generals, intelligence chiefs, and industrial leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "for 30 years we've played by their rules, accepted their limitations, allowed them to believe we were just another minor species seeking their approval." She paused, looking at each face around the table. "That ends today. Admiral Brooks, what's our actual military capacity?" Admiral John Brooks, head of Earth's Combined Fleet Command, smiled coldly. "Madam President, our official reports list 200 active combat vessels. The real number is closer to 800, with production facilities capable of tripling that within 6 months. And our strategic capabilities? Fully operational. Every human colony has been secretly militarized. Our shipyards have been disguised as civilian installations. The enemy expects to face a minor power with limited resources." His smile widened. "They're about to learn why humanity survived the evolutionary process on a death world, On the outer rim world of Haven's End, Captain Tom Riley watched as massive cargo ships arrived daily, their holds filled with military equipment that had supposedly never existed. Weapons that made Dominion technology look primitive. Ships designed for the kind of warfare the galaxy had forgotten was possible. The aliens had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed human diplomacy represented human capability. They were about to learn the difference between humanity at peace and humanity at war. As news of the failed negotiations spread across human space, colonial militias began emerging from hidden bases. Defensive platforms powered up systems that had been dormant for decades. Factories switched from civilian production to military hardware with an efficiency that spoke of long preparation. The galaxy had demanded humanity's submission. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous, a species that had spent 30 years preparing for this exact moment. The war was coming, and humanity was ready. The first strike. The Dominion's first mistake was believing they would choose when the war began. Admiral Kate Stone stood in the command center of the newly revealed Earth Defense Station Alpha, hidden in the asteroid belt, between Mars and Jupiter. For 20 years it had masqueraded as a mining operation. In reality, it was the largest military installation humanity had ever built, equipped with weapons that existed in no official record. "Admiral," Commander Sarah Walsh reported from the tactical station, "Dominion advance fleets have entered the outer systems, 3 battle groups, just as intelligence predicted." Stone nodded. The aliens were following their standard playbook: seize. A few outer colonies demonstrate overwhelming force and wait for the humans to beg for mercy. They had done it to 17 other species over the past century. Time to intercept? 6 hours if they maintain current heading toward New Montana. Perfect. Stone turned to the communications officer. Send the message. Across human space, identical transmissions went out on all frequencies, in every galactic language. This is Admiral Kate Stone of the Earth Defense Force. Any alien military vessel found in human space after this transmission will be considered hostile and will be destroyed without warning. You have been advised. On the bridge of the Dominion flagship Eternal Glory, Fleet Commander Zek received the transmission with amusement. His vessel alone displaced more tonnage than the entire official human fleet. How quaint, he buzzed to his bridge crew. The humans think they can intimidate us. His tactical officer, a younger Dominion warrior, seemed less certain. Commander, our intelligence reports may be incomplete. Perhaps we should what? Fear a species that has never won a major engagement? Zek's compound eyes glittered, with predatory satisfaction. Continue course. We will take their colony worlds one by one until they surrender Earth itself. What Zek didn't know was that every human colony had been preparing for this moment for 30 years. On New Montana, Governor Lisa Parker watched the Dominion fleet approach on long-range sensors. The colonists had been evacuated to underground shelters that could withstand orbital bombardment, but the planet was far from defenseless. "Sir," her military aide, Colonel Jim Hayes, reported, "the packages are in position." Parker nodded grimly. The packages were antimatter mines positioned along the most likely approach vectors. Each one carried enough destructive power to vaporize a city. There were 50 of them floating in the dark between the stars, invisible to conventional sensors. The Dominion fleet approached New Montana with typical arrogance, their formation designed more for intimidation than tactical efficiency. They expected the humans to either flee or surrender. They were not prepared for what happened next. The first mine detonated directly beneath the flagship's hull. The explosion was visible from 3 systems away, a miniature star that consumed the Eternal Glory and 2 escort vessels in an instant. Before the Dominion forces could react, 17 more mines triggered in sequence, turning their advance formation into expanding clouds of plasma and debris. In the aftermath, only 4 ships remained from the original battle group of 23. Their panicked transmissions filled subspace. "Base command. The humans have weapons of mass destruction. The fleet is gone. Repeat, the fleet is gone." But the surprises were just beginning. On Earth, President Clark watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Phase 1 complete. Admiral Brooks, initiate Phase 2. Across human space, ships that had been hidden for decades began to move. Not the small patrol vessels the galaxy knew about, but massive dreadnoughts that had been constructed in secret shipyards, hidden within gas giants and asteroid fields. Ships designed with one purpose: to end wars quickly and decisively. The Dominion's second mistake was assuming the humans would fight defensively. While alien commanders struggled to understand how their advance fleet had been destroyed, human battle groups were already moving toward Dominion space. These were not the limited patrols the galaxy had observed, but full fleet formations that dwarfed anything the Dominion had ever assembled. Captain Mike Chen, commanding the strike group, headed for the Dominion supply depot at Kepler Station, reviewed his orders one final time. No warnings, no demands for surrender, no diplomatic niceties. The time for such courtesies had ended when the Dominion demanded Earth's submission. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "Kepler Station is coming into range. They're hailing us." "Ignore them," Chen replied coldly. "All weapons, fire at will." The station died in the first salvo along with its garrison fleet. The pattern was repeated at 17 other Dominion installations across the outer sectors. In less than 6 hours, 30 years of Dominion expansion was erased. The galaxy was beginning to understand. They hadn't just provoked a minor species. They had awakened apex predators who had been hiding among them for 3 decades, and humanity was just getting started. The tide turns. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. In 48 hours, the Dominion had lost over 300 ships and 27 installations. The hegemony's border fleets were reporting similar losses. Species that had never even heard of humans were now scrambling to recall their vessels from what had become known as the human kill zone. Elder Bluewing's feathers were pale with stress as she addressed the panicked assembly. "The humans have destroyed Kepler Station, the Nexus shipyards, and the entire Third Hegemony fleet. Our intelligence was completely wrong. They're not a minor power. They're a military superpower that's been hiding in plain sight." General Vex, one of the few survivors of the Third Fleet's destruction, stood with visible effort. His left arm was in a neural brace, and burn scars marked his face. "The human vessels, they're not like anything we've encountered. Their weapons penetrate our shields as if they don't exist. Their ships are faster, more maneuverable, and they fight with a coordination that suggests centuries of experience." Prime Hive speaker Clicks, who had been so confident just days earlier, now trembled as he spoke. "How did we miss this? Our intelligence networks are the finest in the galaxy." "Because they wanted us to miss it," General Vex replied grimly. "Every human ship we cataloged, every weapon system we analyzed, every military installation we identified, it was all theater. They've been playing a game of deception for 30 years, and we never suspected." The truth was even more disturbing than they realized. On Earth, Admiral Brooks reviewed the strategic situation with cold satisfaction. The human military had been designed from the ground up to fight exactly this kind of war, outnumbered against multiple enemies, with total victory as the only acceptable outcome. "Sir," his aide, Captain Tom Mitchell, reported, "our advance forces have reached the Dominion core systems. They're encountering heavier resistance, but nothing we can't handle." Brooks nodded. The Dominion was finally deploying their main battle fleets, but they were fighting the previous war. Their tactics assumed warfare between roughly equal forces, gradual escalation, negotiated settlements. They didn't understand that humanity had no intention of negotiating. "What's the status of Operation Avalanche?" "Commencing in 6 hours. The hegemony won't know what hit them." Meanwhile, on the hegemony fortress world of Terminus, War Leader Supreme Crack reviewed the disaster reports with growing horror. The humans weren't just winning, they were annihilating everything in their path with a precision that spoke of detailed planning and perfect intelligence. "How did they know exactly where to strike?" he demanded of his intelligence chief. "Sir, we believe they've had operatives in place for decades. Every major installation they've hit was attacked at its weakest point, at the optimal time for maximum damage. The reality was even simpler than that. Humanity had been preparing for this war since first contact. Every trade delegation had included intelligence operatives. Every cultural exchange had been a reconnaissance mission. Every diplomatic negotiation had been an opportunity to study alien psychology and tactics. Agent Rebecca Torres, who had spent 5 years as a cultural attaché on the Dominion capital world, now watched from her hidden position as the planetary defense grid powered up. In 3 hours, the human strike force would arrive, and the Dominion High Command would discover just how thoroughly they had been infiltrated. "Control, this is Nightingale," she transmitted on the encrypted channel. "Defense grid frequencies confirmed. Transmitting override codes now." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Sleeper agents who had posed as merchants, diplomats, researchers, and refugees for decades were now revealing their true purpose. The Dominion's own defensive systems turned against them, their communication networks were compromised, and their strategic databases had been copied to human intelligence. Back on Earth, President Clark received the reports with grim satisfaction. "How long before they request negotiations?" "Intelligence estimates another 48 hours, Admiral Brooks replied. "The Dominion has lost 60% of their fleet strength. The hegemony is down to 40%. The smaller species are already withdrawing from the alliance. And our losses? Minimal. 17 ships, mostly from the initial reconnaissance phases. Our main battle fleets haven't even been fully deployed yet." Clark nodded. The aliens had made the fatal mistake of assuming human diplomacy reflected human capability. They had demanded Earth's surrender, expecting a minor species to capitulate to superior numbers. Instead, they had awakened a civilization that had been preparing for total war since the day they first encountered alien life. "Maintain the pressure," she ordered. "When they come crawling back to negotiate, I want them to understand exactly what they're dealing with." The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their patience, their planning, and their absolute refusal to lose. The New Order. The surrender came exactly 47 hours later. Ambassador James Reed stood once again in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, but the dynamics had shifted completely. Where once 47 species had sat in judgment of humanity, now barely 20 remained. The others had either been destroyed, had fled to distant sectors, or were desperately trying to negotiate separate peace agreements with Earth. Prime, Hive Speaker Clix, his once proud posture now bent with defeat, approached the human delegation with trembling limbs. "Ambassador Reed, the Dominion formally requests terms." Reed looked at the shattered alien leader with the same calm expression he had worn when leaving these same chambers just 1 week earlier, 1 week that had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. "Terms? How interesting. I seem to recall you being quite specific about your own terms not long ago." General Vex, representing what remained of the hegemony, stepped forward. His military bearing couldn't quite hide the desperation in his voice. "Surely Earth doesn't seek the complete destruction of our civilizations. There must be room for accommodation." "Accommodation," Reed repeated thoughtfully. "Like the accommodation you offered us, evacuating our colonies, dismantling our defenses, accepting your oversight." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm afraid those particular accommodations are no longer available." The human fleet had not stopped its advance. Dominion space was now effectively under Earth control, with human battle groups patrolling what had once been the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The hegemony's remaining worlds were blockaded, their military completely neutralized. Smaller species were discovering that their trade routes, their colonies, even their home systems were now within range of human weapons. Captain Lisa Morgan, now promoted to admiral and commanding the occupation fleet over Nexus Prime, watched the Dominion capital burn. Not from orbital bombardment. Humanity was more subtle than that. The planet's economy had simply collapsed when human forces cut off all trade and communication. The proud alien civilization was learning what it meant to be truly isolated. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from the Centauri Federation, the Vegan Republic, and the Outer Rim Confederacy. They're all offering unconditional terms." Morgan nodded. It was exactly what Earth's strategic planners had predicted. The galaxy operated on the principle of strength through alliance. Once those alliances crumbled, each species was forced to face humanity alone, and none of them were strong enough for that fight. Back on Haven Point, Reed continued the negotiations that would reshape galactic civilization. "The terms are quite simple," he explained to the assembled delegates. "First, all species will withdraw their military forces to their core systems. Second, all territorial claims against human space are permanently renounced. Third, reparations will be paid for the cost of this conflict." Elder Bluewing, one of the few aliens who had consistently urged caution, dared to speak. "Reparations? But surely the damage to our own forces was the consequence of your aggressive actions." Reed cut her off smoothly. "Earth sought peace. You chose war. The responsibility for the consequences lies entirely with you." The fourth term was the one that truly terrified them. "All species will submit their military capabilities and strategic resources to human oversight. Any future conflicts will be mediated by Earth authority." It was, in effect, the establishment of human hegemony over the known galaxy. What the Dominion had tried to achieve through threats and intimidation, humanity had accomplished through superior planning and overwhelming force. President Clark, monitoring the negotiations from Earth, turned to Admiral Brooks with a question that had been troubling her. "John, were we always planning for this outcome? Total domination rather than just defense?" Brooks considered his answer carefully. "Madam President, we prepared for every possible outcome. If the galaxy had been willing to treat us as equals, we would have remained equals. But they chose to see us as subjects, so we've given them what they understand, a clear hierarchy with humanity at the top." The signing ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. 47 species had once sat in judgment of humanity's right to exist as a free civilization. Now, the survivors signed documents that acknowledged Earth as the supreme authority in galactic affairs. As the last signature was recorded, Reed made one final statement. "Let this be remembered throughout the galaxy. Humanity sought peace, but we were prepared for war. We offered friendship, but we were ready for conquest. We preferred negotiation, but we were capable of domination." He paused, looking at each alien delegate in turn. "The choice was yours. The consequences are what you earned." The galaxy had a new order now, and humanity stood at its apex. The talking phase of galactic civilization was over. The age of human supremacy had begun, and every species in known space understood exactly how it had happened. They had mistaken human patience for weakness, human diplomacy for submission. They would never make that mistake again. The end.